Mr. TRICHET, welcome to our program.
It's a pleasure.
What do you think is the biggest issue concerning global economic growth and financial markets now?
Well, I would say that we have certainly the problem of monetary policy, and we expect the success of monetary policy to get back to price stability. It's not yet done. We have the problem of stagnation of productivity progress, which we are observing in many economies and at the global level, at the level of the global economy as a whole. And that's a problem because it hampers the growth capacity, the growth possibility of all economies and of the global economy. Then we have, of course, the hampering of global growth and growth in each particular country, which is associated with the geopolitical tensions. The last point I would mention would be associated with these geopolitical tensions, the problem we have of partial dismantling of global value chains, which are in a way hampered again by these tensions, by the so-called decoupling that some are advocating, which would be very bad, obviously. And I made myself the point several times in this Bund Summit that I was expecting that we would limit as maximum this deglobalization, because obviously globalization has paved the way for our fellow citizens in all countries in the world for prosperity and growth, and it remains very important. That would be the main issues.
As you mentioned, some countries are stepping towards deglobalization, especially this year we see some Western countries have specifically slapping some tariffs on Chinese new energy products. What's your take on this trend, and what do you think is the motivation behind that?
I am personally convinced that all these issues can be solved by discussion. I see all possibilities of discussing, having the discussion which will be as frank, as open as possible, and I take it that it would be in the interest of China and the interest of the European to continue to have as active as possible relationship between us.
In the first half of this year, we see German investment in China reached a record high. Do you think China is still a smart investment?
As regards growth in China, I understand that the 5% growth for the GDP this year and maybe next year is something which is considered very likely. There is a lot of reasons when I look at all projections made by private and public sector and the international financial institutions. I see many reasons why it should be confirmed. As regards the investment that are made by the European in China, the European Union is the big, more open economy that I can find. We are much more open than the US and than many other countries. So for us, trade is of the essence. And China knows better than anybody that trade has been a major part of its prosperity. And since the reform that were started a long time ago, it's clearly trade that international trade that had permitted China to develop as fantastically as it did. It's clearly a win-win game.
The world is now expecting the US Federal Reserve to lower its interest rate this month. If that happened, what kind of impact do you think it would bring to the global economy, specifically the Chinese economy and the European economy?
I would say, frankly speaking, when the decision is taken, now it's very close, it's so, I would say, massively anticipated by all economic agents, all market participants, that I don't expect that it would change dramatically the perspective and the situation. Everybody expects now in the market that the success of the disinflationary process in the US calls now, as it did in Europe a few months ago, for the start of a decrease of interest rates. The only unknown still is whether it would be X or Y percent basis point, but that's not too important for me. What is important for me is that the decrease of the US Fed rates is clearly anticipated already by all markets. Central banks have very clearly said what was their definition of price stability, namely inflation around 2% in the medium term. And that is something which is very important because everybody knows what is the goal of the Federal Reserve in the US. Everybody knows what is the goal of the ECB in Europe. So I would expect central banks to continue to be very determined on their action and to ensure price stability and the credibility of delivering price stability in the medium term.
Thanks for your time.
It was a pleasure, ma'am.